My mother said later she was unable to answer, unable to break the lock with his eyes. She said a lot of things, unfortunately saying many of them to the local newspaper editor, who soon had reporters from TV stations and tabloids breathing down our necks. People drove slowly past our house, and you could just feel them pointing and telling their children about the strange woman who believes Jesus visits her. Hysterical women and old black people would stop by with messages they wanted her to give to Jesus. Soon the house overflowed with gifts and flowers and cards and sacks of mail. When the newspapers reported that Jesus seemed most interested in the items of food and paid hardly any attention to the letters, supermarkets worth of groceries began showing up at our door. Of course, that's when the grumbling started in town. But fact is, my mother wouldn't let us touch one crumb of that food. She saved it all for Jesus' visits. And who would be brave enough to swipe something from the cash of our Lord? What if it interfered with someone getting a blessing, a cure for a disease or something? Anyway, it will suffice to say Jesus got his pick of the goodies and we ate the same old grits and salt pork. Reporters staked out our house, but Jesus wouldn't come if anyone other than my mother was awake. He somehow knew if someone was watching, which added to the mystique. Finally, of course, Jesus slipped. He wandered out of the house, his belly full, and my mother wondering at the fractured parable he'd struggled to tell her, and walked right into the hands of the sheriff. Jesus turned out to be a hippie who'd built himself a wigwam in the woods, or at least that was the police version. The fervent man never answered to any name other than Jesus Christ, and he seemed confused about which Nazareth he'd landed in. They tried to charge him with fraud, but the judge freed him on his own recognizance. If you can't trust Jesus, who can you trust? And Jesus disappeared. Now, my mother couldn't just let it lie. She couldn't accept that she'd been had by an LSD-addled wild man. She insisted it really had been Jesus, and the police had made a terrible mistake in handcuffing our Lord. And that kept the headline writers cranking for a while, and it was enough to run off my old man, a long-haul truck driver who just stopped coming home from the road. After that, we scraped to get by. Still, my mother didn't learn her lesson. She kept talking to reporters about Jesus, and once a year or so, one would stop by our old frame house in the woods and interview Mama about the visitations. I still see the occasional anniversary story in the Albuquerque papers. Out here, of course, folks don't know about my connection to the Jesus lady, and I don't spread it around. I try to live my life as quietly as possible. I'd always hoped the Cutwaller curse of infamy would skip a generation. The gullibility my mother and her father shared is not the kind of trait you want to pass on. Maybe that's why I've never had any kids, never even been married. If it's in the family line, maybe it'll stop with me. Maybe that's also why I decided to become a private eye. If I'm gullible, I tell myself, if I've got that terrible Cutwaller gene, then I won't make it long in this business. So I keep testing it, keep double-checking everything, trying to make sure I'm not being fooled. And if I am fooled, I keep quiet about it. Truth is, I never really expected to make it as a private eye, and that's nearly been the case. The work has been so sparse over the past few years that I've spent more time reading paperbacks about private eyes than I have doing actual investigating. But jobs trickle in, and I manage to keep afloat. The trick to any kind of fringe business like this is low overhead. I may have the lowest overhead of anyone you've ever met. I work out of my Central Avenue kitchenette, which costs less than $300 a month. I drive a 20-year-old Chevy Nova, Spanish for no-go, that costs me nothing but gas and insurance. The only business expenses are the